Now that we've looked at carbohydrates and lipids, let's look at our proteins. So proteins are like construction workers and tools that build and repair things. Proteins are the workers who build new walls, such as muscles, and fix leaks, like repair tissues. So just like our other two, we're going to start with our fill in the blank. So proteins are made of amino acids. So structurally, they provide support, such as the keratin in your hair and nails. Enzymatically, they speed up chemical reactions from amylase. And transport, they carry substances throughout the body, such as the hemoglobin in the blood. So you have different levels of protein structure. You have primary, this is the sequence of amino acids. Secondary, this is the alpha helix or beta sheet of the polypeptide chain. You have tertiary, the overall 3D shape of a single peptide. And you have quaternary, this is the interaction of multiple peptide chains. And they are made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So remember that. So the CHON. So if we look at this polypeptide chain, each one of those little circles would be a monomer. So, each one of those circles would be an amino acid. The whole chain would be the monomer. And if you see those little lines in between the chains, in between the circles, those are your peptide bonds. And here's a little fun fact that I thought you might like. If your hair is curly, then those bonds, those positive and negative bonds, are actually what causes that to be curly. This is also how a perm works. This is how, if you have naturally curly hair, you just naturally have a little bit more positive and negative bonds in your keratin, which is the protein that makes up your hair, and that's what makes it curly. And if you curl your hair with an overnight style and you let it dry in those curly parts, then this is also why it will be curly. So, again, proteins fold into a 3D shape, and those are your levels of your protein from your primary, secondary, tertiary, and so on. And you can see that your hydrophobic amino acids, like your nonpolar yellow right there, is actually hides. So we'll kind of go into that vortex right there with your protein, and it'll hide away. So proteins are also important, as you can see with their protein structure. You've got your primary structure, your secondary structure with that alpha helix, your tertiary structure, which is starting with your 3D structure, and then also your quaternary structure. So each amino acid will have this kind of structure with your hydrogens, nitrogens, carbons, and oxygens. So, proteins are very important with your cell membrane. They are involved in nearly every cellular function, including facilitating transport across cell membranes. So, those little pink and blue blobs, I guess you could describe them as, in your cell membrane is actually what is able to bring in sugars, bring in salts, transport water across that hydrophobic cell membrane that we've talked about. Some examples of proteins would be your any kind of meat product. It would be beans. Mushrooms have protein. Fish, eggs, some milk has protein. Things like that. And that is what makes you big and strong. So proteins actually have these amino acids. So each amino acid will have a 3-letter kind of code to it, and that determines what protein is there. And then between that, you will have your different proteins, just like in our example with the dots, all the different colored dots that creates that monomer. Each one of those would have this 3-letter code. So look at this first one, for example, and we will decode it. So the first letter is C. You're going to see that the C is right there in the middle. We're going to start in the center and find the C. The next letter is G. So we're going to go to the G. And then the last one is T. So you can see the T, and the protein name would be arginine. So that would be the amino acid that would build up the protein. And then I want you to go ahead and pause this video and decode the rest of these. Okay, this is our very last macromolecule. Let's look at nucleic acid. So DNA is the blueprint that contains all the instructions for making you. Kind of like how a blueprint tells a builder how to construct a house. RNA is like the manual that helps put the instructions into action, making sure the right parts or the proteins are built to keep your body working. So let's look at what nucleic acids are made of, and they are made of nucleotides. Again, you have two types. You have DNA, which stores genetic information, and RNA plays a role in protein synthesis. And the function of DNA would be it contains the instructions for building proteins in living organisms. So you can start to see how all of these different parts of chemistry actually work together in order to build out biology. And they are made of 5 of those elements. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. If you look at that, right there where that circle is, you can see that it has a base. That's that orange little part right there. And then in the kind of the ladder, it almost looks like a spiral staircase. If you were to hold on to those blue parts, that spiral, those would be where the carbon, the 5-carbon sugar, and the phosphate would be. And that is what a nucleotide monomer is. It includes a base, a 5-carbon sugar, and a phosphate. And we will talk about this a little bit more in depth, but you can see that each one goes with certain things. So in this example, you can see that the orange always goes with the yellow color, and the green will always go with the blue color. So A goes with T, and a good way to remember that is apples grow on trees, and C goes with G. So cars are in the garage. And DNA stays in the nucleus, and RNA is a copy of one side of DNA, and it leaves the nucleus. And some examples of some nucleic acids was anything that was once alive. So that could be your meat, it could be even eggs, fruits, vegetables, all those different types of things would be considered a nucleic acid. And here's a fun way to remember our macromolecules. So if you think of a hamburger or a cheeseburger, our carbohydrate will be that quick energy. That would be the bun of your hamburger. Your nucleic acid is what carries your genetic information so that anything that is alive, so that could be your tomato, your lettuce, your actual hamburger, that is your nucleic acid. Your lipids are your long-term energy or in your cell transport. So that would be your cheese. And then your protein is your enzymes. So it would be enzymes, muscle, and cell transport, and that is your meat on your cheeseburger. And you can see all of those different parts in your cell membrane. You've got your carbohydrate right up there, your lipids, your protein, and then your nucleic acid is what brings it all together in order to function properly. So now that we've got all of those macromolecules, I want you to continue on and go do your mad cow disease case study.